Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about gardening, botanical history, and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is April 16th. Today we celebrate a botanical artist who learned to paint from her famous younger brother. We'll also learn about a botanist who was fascinated with seed dispersion and weeds. We'll hear a little snippet about spring from an author and ecologist. And we grow that garden library today with a book about the cultural significance behind Japanese gardens. And then we'll wrap things up with National Orchid Day. But first, here's today's curated news. Today's curated news comes to us from the St. Louis Business Journal. This is a piece that was written by Nathan Rubelke, and it's titled, Missouri Botanical Gardens, Robbie Hart Finds His Passion in the Himalayas. Well, this is a fun article to read about a working botanist. Robbie is an ethnobotanist, and his research focuses on climate change in the Himalayas and how it affects the indigenous people of the area. Now, through this article, we get to understand a little bit about what Robbie does for the Missouri Botanical Garden, but then also his fascinating work in the Himalayas. Robbie says, most of my work is looking at how mountain plants respond to climate change. And then also, because he's an ethnobotanist, he's trying to work into that how the indigenous people's traditions have to respond in regard to that change. Anyway, this is a short and sweet little post about Robbie Hart. And you can read all about him in the Facebook group for the show. Just search for the word Robbie using the little magnifying glass up at the top of the page, and this post will pop right up. Now, if you're not in the group and you'd like to join, it is so easy to do so. All you need to do is the next time you're on Facebook, type in the words Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend, and then request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. It's time for today's botanical history. Here's botanical history for today, April 16th. Today is the birthday of the American botanical illustrator Ellen Thayer Fisher, who was born on this day, April 16th, in 1847. Born in Boston, Ellen's family eventually moved to Brooklyn, New York. The daughter of a Civil War surgeon and doctor, Ellen's younger brother Abbott became a famous American painter and naturalist. When Abbott attended the Brooklyn Art School and the Academy of Design, he would come back home and share with Ellen what he was learning about drawing and painting. When she was 22, Ellen married Edward Thornton Fisher, and together they had 7 children. In her spare time, Ellen focused on the subject of botanicals, painting mainly floral still lifes. Sometimes her brother Abbott would assist with the final touches of her work, which is why some of her paintings are also signed by her brother. Abbott always called her Nelly, and Ellen always signed her paintings with this family endearment. To help with her family's finances, Ellen painted for exhibitions, likely using her brother's connections, but she also gave lessons by letter to aspiring artists. And by 1884, Ellen began producing art for the Boston publisher Louis Prang, the man known as the father of the American Christmas card. Louis turned Ellen's art into beautiful greeting cards. Some of Ellen's more popular pieces feature blackberries, poppies, and there's one with a thistle that's visited by a bumblebee. And today is the birthday of the English botanist and ecologist Sir Edward Salisbury, who was born on this day, April 16th in 1886. The youngest of 9 children, Edward's passion for plants started as a young boy. Edward loved to go out into the countryside and dig up plants to grow in his own garden back at home. Once he identified the plant, he would attach a label that had the Latin name. Now, his siblings often made fun of his little pastime. His older brothers would tease him by calling his garden the graveyard. Well, Edward grew up to become one of the leading British botanists of the 20th century. And during World War II, Edward was the director of Kew. It was a position he would hold for 13 years. Now, during the war, Edward wrote a paper called The Flora of Bombed Areas. Bomb sites were fascinating to Edward. What drew his attention was the way that seeds were dispersed in the aftermath of bombing. Edward immersed himself in the subject of seeds and how they traveled, whether by human shoes, bird droppings, animal feed bags, or wind. And Edward wrote many books, but he's best known for his classic garden book called Weeds and Aliens, one of the best titled garden books in history. In the book, Edward tells the story of going for a walk in the countryside, and when he got home, he discovered that the cuffs of his wool trousers were full of seeds. In a moment of inspiration, Edward decided to try to grow them. Well, the net result was that Edward grew more than 300 plants, comprising over 20 different species of weeds. Indeed, Edward loved plants, and he was especially interested in their native habitats and how they grew in the wild. He also had strong opinions about plants. He once said, "The double lily was and is a crime against God and man." Edward died in 1978. He lived to be 92. It's time for today's Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words come to us from the ecologist, writer, and teacher, Amy Seidel. This is an excerpt from Amy's book called Early Spring, an ecologist and her children waking to a warming world. The world is exploding in emerald, sage, and lusty chartreuse, neon green, with so much yellow in it. It is an explosive green that, if one could watch it moment by moment throughout the day, would grow in every dimension. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Japanese Garden Design by Mark Peter Keene. This book came out in 2017, and in this book, the landscape architect Mark Peter Keene shares how gardens have been designed in Japan. Mark moved to Japan in 1985, and he's been teaching garden design and designing gardens in Japan ever since. Mark does a masterful job of conveying the intentions and motivations behind some of Japan's most beautiful gardens. Now, intentions and motivations are two important aspects of Japanese gardens that often go unnoticed since Japanese gardens look so natural and wild. Yet these peaceful places are man-made. Japanese gardens tell stories, and those stories, according to Mark, were very controlled and intentional. Mark helps translate these stories, along with helping us to appreciate the metaphors that the gardens represent. And in the foreword to Mark's book is this charming anecdote. At the end of his life, Ezra Pound wrote, "Let the wind speak. That is paradise." The Japanese garden designer, like the poet, creates a theater for the wind to speak. With Japanese garden design, Mr. Keene provides an etymology, grammar, and lexicon for deciphering just what the wind has to say. This book is 192 pages of beautiful Japanese gardens, along with cultural and historical insights that make the beauty of these gardens even more meaningful. You can get a copy of Japanese Garden Design by Mark Peter Keene and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $12. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is National Orchid Day. It's been observed annually on April 16th since 2015. Now, orchids are my new go-to order from the florist. If I need to give a gift, I've taken to sending orchids because they're so long-lived and they are spectacular. Orchids have been an obsession for many gardeners. The great Enid Haupt, also known as the fairy godmother of American horticulture, fell immediately in love with orchids when her future husband, Ira Haupt, gifted her with a Cymbidium orchid. Enid was immediately enthralled by it, and she began a lifelong love affair with orchids. And I love what the American paleontologist, evolutionary biologist, and science historian Stephen Jay Gould once wrote about orchids. He wrote, "Orchids manufacture their intricate devices from the common components of ordinary flowers, parts usually fitted for very different functions. Orchids were not made by an ideal engineer. They are jury-rigged from a limited set of available components. Thus, they must have evolved from ordinary flowers." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota, with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, and Eric Begay. If you want to read today's show notes, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can always get in touch by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you on Monday.